Hey College Success, welcome to week 2 of the semester. This week runs from June 14th through the 20th. Hopefully you were able to navigate and get used to the course a little bit more through week 1. I know sometimes it takes up until like week 2 and week 3 to really feel comfortable, but just as a reminder, when you log into our course in the Start Here section, that welcome video will stay there all summer, so if you need to go back and refer to it, feel free to do so. Also in this same section, you have all of your syllabi and resources as needed. And like I said, you'll probably feel like you need those less and less as the weeks go on. In the lessons area, when you click in there, there's another link to your textbook access, although there are direct links to each chapter inside each week. And here is the forum where you can pose questions. By the time that you view this video, week 1 will be completely grayed out, just like you see on my screen. I do want to let you know that toward the end of the semester, usually around week 6 actually, I reopen week 1. I do this because there are some students who may be registered late for the course, or because maybe they just had a hard time navigating everything early on in the semester, or they missed an assignment here or there, especially because we have so many assignments every week. So if you fall into one of those categories, look for that opportunity around week 6 to go back into week 1 to make up some points. Okay, so for this week, again, we are in week 2. This is going to be chapters 2 and 3. As I mentioned in the welcome video, and as you saw hopefully on your syllabus, most weeks have 2 chapters. And so I know it seems like a lot, but again, when we're taking 16 weeks worth of work and combining it into an 8-week session, that just happens, especially for a 3-credit hour course. So you can see real quick in the snapshot, all the things in red are your assignments. I also put those self-reflections there. Those are not worth any points, but those are good for like a pre-post reflection purpose. And then you do see, again, you have 2 discussion forums. So you are responding your original post in both of those by Wednesday for week 2 attendance. You have to post in both to get 100% full week 2 attendance. If you only post in one, you'll get partial attendance points. And then you need to also make sure that you respond to 2 classmates in each forum. So 4 responses total by Sunday. And then the rest of all these assignments are due Sunday as well. So if I go ahead and scroll down, you can see we're going to be in the materials folder for just a little bit. There are direct links to the chapter 2 textbook and chapter 3 textbook link. I have those already up and going right there. I'm going to go ahead and start lecturing with chapter 2. So again, what I'm going to do for our purposes is I'm going to use the PowerPoint as a basis for my lecture. And then I will kind of just go in to the textbook and just show you real quickly the sections. Whenever I lecture from the PowerPoints, this is just an overview. It's kind of like what I would do in class. We would do an overview, we would hold a discussion, and then it's the expectation that you go back into the text on your own, either having read it before the lecture that you've watched, or you read it after the lecture, or you hone in on particular sections that you feel like you struggle with or need more information on. All right, so chapter 2 is knowing yourself as a learner. So what does chapter 2 cover? So here is the overview of chapter 2. So it's talking about like motivation and learning styles and how you apply what you know. So that's a real quick snapshot. Here is the reflection piece. So when you're back into the materials, out of the materials folder into the assignment folder, you'll see these 4 questions. As I said in the week 1 video, you can use these as a pre and post chapter reflection. So right now you can kind of pause the video and just look at these 4 questions and think, okay, how would I grade myself, or how would I answer these questions? And then when we're done with chapter 2, both the lecture and then after you spent time in the text itself, revisit these questions and see if you can answer them differently or if you know any more about these particular areas. Okay, so again, here is just an overview of the different things that chapter 2 is going to talk about. It's going to talk about different learning styles, personalities, growth versus fixed mindset, different learning models, and they're going to bring up that concept of hidden curriculum again. I know we touched on it in week 1. They're going to talk about it a little bit again in this particular chapter. All right, so first section of the text says the power to learn. So here are the questions that it starts off with to consider. Do you know what happens to you when you learn something? Do you know the different ways that you can take in information? Do you study differently depending on you know, the outcome. Are you trying to take a test and earn a certain grade? Are you trying to write a paper and earn certain feedback? So do you approach it differently based on those things? So the first thing you want to do is just know yourself as a learner. How do you take information in whenever you're not only just a student, but in general in the world, at your job, with your family, with your friends? How do you take information in? How do you get that new knowledge? And how do you know when you've learned something and it's correct? So these are all things that are important to know about yourself as a learner. So the nature of learning, all these things go into how we learn. Our attitude, our motivation, our methods, your learning preferences, the atmosphere, the environment, like all of these things come together and really do make a big impact on the learning process. And so here in this table here, this is what would be called Bloom's taxonomy. So no, it's a little small there. So when you go into your actual chapter, again, after I lecture, I always encourage you to go back in and read a little bit more in depth in the actual text itself. And then you can see here's the copy of that table, a little bit larger if you needed to see it that way. But this is what's called Bloom's taxonomy, and it's different ways of knowing, different ways of understanding what we learn. It's normally presented like kind of in a triangle where this is the base. We always have to remember. That's the hallmark of learning. We have to remember. We have to recall basic facts, and then we build on that from there. After we remember, we should understand those ideas and concepts and be able to explain them, relationships. From there, we should be able to apply it, use information in new ways. So whatever that might look like, it's going to vary. You know, apply it in a presentation, apply it in a speech. Then analyze. We need to be able to compare and contrast, make connections, eventually to do some evaluation to try to really critically think or support ideas. And create is the highest level of knowing, is to be able to produce something new. Okay, so this is the different levels. And most of your tests in college, like your entry-level courses, are going to kind of stay around this area. And then you'll notice as you work your way through and get to your content, your career pathway courses, you're going to start seeing more of this Bloom's taxonomy used in your different assessments. So whether you're doing labs or clinicals or papers or presentations, they're going to start using more of these different levels and ways of knowing. So a part of learning is also being motivated. So how can we be motivated, stay motivated? How can we be resilient? And how can we kind of, I don't want to say ignore, but challenge negative thinking and biases to make sure that we do keep with that motivation? So the first thing that the chapter in this section talks about is resilience and grit, making sure that you are persevering, that maybe you come across obstacles, but despite these obstacles, you keep working toward your goal. So here is kind of keeping grit in mind. It's a little acronym here. You want to look at your growth. How are you growing and making changes and perspectives? Resilience, you respond to ideas and overcome adversity. Instinct, your guts, and then tenacity, your level to which you persist and commit. So this is kind of just like an acronym to help you remember grit and the things that you can do to show that resilience. So how do you develop or work on your grit? You want to take risks. You want to pursue what interests you. You want to keep practicing, knowing that you're going to make mistakes, but keep going. Find purpose and surround yourself with people who are just as determined as you are, so that's another source of motivation. The chapter also talks about something, this is relatively, I would say this is relatively new-ish, the UGT, the uses and gratification model. So kind of thinking about these different things as it relates to your perseverance and your grit. So basically asking yourself these questions right here. What are you motivated by? What motivates you? Is it earn a grade, get a certain level in your career, in your certification, your job, whatever it might be? What are you trying to fulfill? What do you expect to have happen during these certain learning activities, whether they're on the course level or a little bit larger, like your program level? How can you use these learning activities to better ensure your experiences? And then how can those result from your choices? Okay. Here's that part we talked about, kind of challenging the negative thinking, negative bias, because sometimes those thoughts do creep into our head, and that's completely natural. So what can we do to combat that? First of all, just acknowledge it. You know, sometimes we do get discouraged or we do have difficult times, and so just be aware of it. Focus on the positive. So maybe you had a bad experience in a class or a paper, you know, and so you're a little bit negative or a little bit weary of it. So focus on positive experiences or positive mindset. Focus on those successes. And then, I don't know if this would work for anyone, but they talk about a gratitude journal. So thinking about all the times that you do, you know, reach an accomplishment, jotting that down. It doesn't even have to be a journal. Post-it notes or whatever it might be, just so that you're kind of reminding yourself that you accomplish and you can do things and you can succeed. Okay, next section 2.3, it's your mindset. So this is where it's going to talk about like growth versus fixed mindset. And so you want to look at different learning goals. So here's what we mean by growth versus fixed. And again, sometimes this is a little small. So if you want to go into the actual text, you can kind of look down and we'll scroll through here, and it's a little bit larger there. So fixed mindset is basically saying, I'm going to give the example, and I hate to pick on math, but a lot of my students talk about math. Let's say you have a particular mindset about math. A fixed mindset would be, I am no good at math. So fixed mindset says, no matter what, you are no good at math. But a growth mindset says, yeah, you know what, I struggle a little bit with math, but with time and energy and effort, I can improve. That's a growth mindset, allowing yourself to acknowledge that things can improve. And so obviously, hopefully by the sounds of it, you can tell that a growth mindset is healthier for success. And so this is going to explain the differences between the two types of mindsets. And Carol Dweck is the researcher behind this growth mindset, and it's a relatively large idea in education the last, I would say, 5 years or so. It's really been talked about a lot, about how the mindset that students have can really determine some levels of achievement they can. And so that section in particular is really helpful if you want to learn more about fixed versus growth mindset. Okay, section 2.4 talks about learning styles. Now, vark-learn.com, and again, excuse me if I've already maybe brought this up, but this is a learning style survey that you are certainly welcome to take. You don't have to, but you can go to this site, scroll down here, what is your learning preference, and you can go through and answer these questions in these scenarios, and it will eventually give you your learning preference, your learning style. And so our textbook kind of narrows it down to visual, oral, and kinesthetic. Although if you take this survey, you can see they also talk about what's called read-write or multimodal. So it gives you a little bit more to think about and consider. So knowing your learning style is going to be helpful because that can allow you to know where you can, really effectively put your time and energy. Now, you don't want to just say, oh, I am kinesthetic, that's the only way I can learn, because that's going to prohibit you in some ways from growing. But it is helpful to know your learning preference so that it can be an effective use of your energy in class or out of class. All right, the next section talks about students with disabilities, and so this will go through like the Americans with Disabilities Act and the importance of really students with any kind of academic disability knowing their learning styles, knowing their particular strengths and struggles, because that is incredibly important as they go through their academic career. And there are a lot of accommodations that are associated with those. Some of you might already have an accommodation that's been sent to me. And so what an accommodation is basically just like an academic assistance that can assist these students to allow them kind of that even playing field. So maybe something like if they were in a physical class, they just need a quiet room for testing. Maybe they need a little bit extra time on their tests. Maybe they need someone to take notes for them. So lots of different accommodations. And sometimes it's because they had an IEP in high school or a 504 in high school. Sometimes it's a temporary, disability or issue that's going on. So this section goes through the disabilities information. Section 2.5 talks about personality types, if you've ever taken like the Myers-Briggs or anything like that. So it's kind of questions to consider. Does your personality really relate to your learning style? You know, how does that impact the work that you do and the people that you work with? And so if you're not familiar with the Myers-Briggs, they are kind of breaking you down into like these different categories: extroverted versus introverted, intuition versus sensing, feeling versus thinking, judging versus perceiving, and sometimes a combination of, and how that can, you can see like here's all the different ways that they can be combined, and how those interact with and play a role in your career choices, because there is a lot of research that says if your career doesn't really match your personality, that can lead, not always, but it can lead to career dissatisfaction. And so it is important to know, you know, both your learning preference as well as your personality styling. So it does kind of, again, impact your work and the way that you could enjoy the career that you're in. So as it starts to wind up, it talks about, you know, decision making and making sure that you know that mistakes are okay to be made, because that's how you learn, that's how you grow, and other things you want to be aware of, which chapter 3 is going to go into, like, you know, time management, things like that. So we'll get there in just a minute. And then as it wraps up, it does again talk about the hidden curriculum. So what is the hidden or invisible curriculum? What are things that you're just expected to know that no one really comes right out and tells you? You just get to college and they're like, oh, you know, you should know how to read a syllabus. You should know how to apply for financial aid. That's part of the hidden curriculum. I mean, there's lots more to it than that, but things that it's just expected. Maybe if your parents didn't go to college, you're a first-generation student, a lot of this is not accessible to you unless you know to ask. And sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And so being aware that there's a lot of these rules and expectations sometimes is helpful in itself. So that kind of wraps up chapter 2. And again, after you have taken a little bit more time to look through the sections in depth, again, like here, I always encourage you to go back through in each section and spend a little bit more time trying to read these sections, especially again, depending on where you are in your field, in your life. Some of these sections might be a little bit more helpful to you than someone else, or vice versa. So I do encourage you to kind of look through the table of contents here and spend more time in particular sections, read through and get more information, especially since you'll have to use it in the assignments coming up. All right, so that is chapter 2. So we're going to go ahead and click over, and I'm going to get into the slides for chapter 3 and bring that up. I'm going to close out chapter 2 here, and you can see chapter 3 is already open up here. All right, so chapter 3, this is time and priority management. So here is your kind of overview again, the things that this chapter will talk about: time management, procrastination, prioritization, and so that's really the big focus. So here's another one of those self-assessments. Kind of look and see how you answer these questions, so that at the end of this chapter, once we've gone through the lecture and you've looked at the chapter itself, if you would answer those questions any differently. So again, here are the big components that we'll talk about in this chapter and that you'll read more about: ways to evaluate your time management, the importance of setting SMART goals, ways to kind of assess your management of time as well. All right, so this is kind of a table. Now, obviously at our school, tuition is a little bit less. And so it says the average cost, we are under the average cost, but it says taking extra semesters of college, it will cost obviously more money than what is just, you know, what you think of, because if you're taking student loans, it's also interest on those loans. And it's potentially lost wages at work if you have to reduce your hours or change your hours for some chance. So that's why kind of they really push the importance of setting goals early on in your college career and then making sure that you're not wasting your time. So time management, depending on where you were before this semester, were you in high school? Were you taking time off? Did you come straight from another college? You know, your time management might vary based on where you have been. So you have to kind of look to see how has your time been previously managed until this semester. And so you really want to take a look to see, does it need changed? Okay. So here is a real quick, and this is going to kind of connect back to high school, but it says that Pew Research said that 82% of teens report that in high school, their writing assignments were only a single paragraph to a page in length. Okay, now in college, even in your lower level courses, your intro to academic writing type courses, you're looking usually at 5 to 7 pages in length. And then your college comp courses, you're looking at longer. So big difference, not only in length, but also the time that you're going to have to dedicate. So in section 3.3, this is a lot of students will admit to this. They procrastinate. They have issues with procrastination. So this section talks specifically about procrastination and why we want to avoid it, because it can lead to being a chronic habit, meaning it's something that you just fall into doing all the time. When there are a lot of things to be done, but not enough time to get them all done, you procrastinate, obviously, it gets worse. And so why do we procrastinate? Well, usually lack of energy, we're tired, and we're all tired, right? We're tired. Maybe it's the physical energy, it's the mental energy. We're not focused. We've got a lot of things going on. We don't have enough of the mind capacity to really focus on one thing at a time, or your fear of failure. So you want to make sure that you are aware that procrastination is harmful in a lot of different ways. So how can we manage procrastination? Well, first thing is get organized, and whatever that means to you. Everyone organizes things a little differently. So organize your space, organize your materials, organize your time. Make sure you're not distracted, whether that's the phone, other people, your environment. Try to get those distractions away. Reward yourself. You know, you work on your paper for a little bit of time, you reward yourself with a coffee, or you reward yourself with an episode of your favorite show. Whatever the case might be, just use those as rewards. And then tell someone else, you know, tell a friend, a parent, a family member, whoever, this is what I'm working on, this is my due date, check in with me, so that someone else is kind of checking in with you as well. You also want to chunk your time. So if you have a big research paper due in a month, you don't want to wait, obviously, till 2 days before. It's not going to happen. So, you know, take it week by week. Week 1, you work on gathering sources and doing an outline. Week 2, you work on fleshing out your outline a little bit more and plugging in your research. Week 3, you really get your outline fleshed all the way out. You have a working draft. Week 4, you peer review, you go through, you edit, you revise, so that you're not doing everything in one particular time. So how can you manage your time? Well, you want to look at how are you spending your time? You know, look to see, you know, what are you doing? Whether you use a paper calendar or an online calendar, you want to look to see where's your time going. So kind of like a little time analysis, which we'll talk about a little bit in this chapter more too, you know, and think about how long a task is going to take. So if you have to write a paper, you know, how long is that going to take you? 30 minutes every day for a week? Or are we talking 2 hours a day for 2 weeks? You know, predict how long a task is going to take and keep your time, you know, set a timer if you need to. And know that sometimes you have to do task A before you can do task B, and so on right there. Here is kind of a task, again, as we look at these sections. These are a little bit more helpful, I think, if you look at the actual textbook, because they're a little bit larger. So looking again, this is the example of estimating how long, you know, different tasks will take, and just kind of, whether it's on a notebook or just in your head, kind of managing to see how long it's going to take you to do all these academic type tasks. And there are different apps that can help you keep track of your time as well. Okay. Another thing that I would really encourage you to do, and they talk about it in your text, is do a time analysis. So thinking about your typical week. How much time do you spend sleeping? How much time do you spend eating? How much time do you spend studying, traveling, working? And really look to see how much time is left over at the end of that week. You know, are you using your time wisely? Some people do this with their money. It's the same concept, you know, budgeting and looking to see how you're using your money. Same thing, look to see how you're using your time. This used to be a requirement in one of my classes where they had to do a time tracking assignment for 1 week. And some students really woke up and thought oh my gosh, I am spending 2 hours a night on Netflix when I should be using that time to study or rest, or, you know, or, oh, I spend 6 hours and every 2 days traveling to work. And sometimes that's unavoidable, but knowing where you have room to kind of make changes is helpful. part of managing your time is also prioritizing your time. You know, how do you prioritize? How do you deal with conflicting priorities? How can you make sure things are completed? And so you want to make sure that you understand the difference between like important and urgent. So that's what this little matrix does right here. And it goes through and it tells you, here are some examples. So if it's important and urgent or not, so here's again, paper due tomorrow. Well, that's pretty urgent. That's a time constraint on it, and it's pretty important. Apply for internship by deadline. So that's why those are both important and urgent. Important because obviously you want to apply for these things and do well on your paper, but urgent because there's time connected to it. Not urgent, but important. So these things, again, they're important, but if it's Monday and your exam is next Friday, that's not necessarily urgent. It'll become more urgent if you let it go and let it go. But that's an example of that. Urgent but not important. Amazon sale and laundry, meaning you need to get to those things, but they're not necessarily high-ranking things. You could put them off a little bit. And then these are examples, obviously, of not urgent, not important. Now, I want to point out that these kind of things could be important for self-care. You want to relax, but you also don't want to make sure, you want to make sure that you're not overindulging in those things as well. Okay. All right, moving right along here. So completing tasks, knowing, again, this is all relating back to time management, knowing what needs done, when it needs done, the resources that are needed to do this, the deadlines that are there, and it goes back through again, kind of knowing what is needed for each of these different areas. I also like that they included this, the importance of where you do your work. Now, we're in a really unique situation because of COVID. This summer we're still home, and I've been home mostly over a year now. I've only been on campus very limited amount for my classes, but it's really important to know where to do your work. Even in a typical semester, if you have to study at home, work at home, having a place that is distraction-free, the right time, sometimes you may hear my children downstairs. I try to record either early in the morning or late in the evening where they might be a little bit less loud, but they're still a little rowdy. There's 3 of them. So finding the right time, I'm trying to find the place in my home where I'm not going to be as distracted. I'm working at my desk right now in my home. So that's important as well in your own space. I have students often say, oh, I fall asleep when I study. I'm like, oh, where do you study? On my bed. Well, yeah, that would probably happen if you're on your bed in a comfy place. So you want to make sure you're in the right mental and physical space to be able to be working. All right, moving into this next section, it talks about SMART goals, setting goals that are SMART. We're going to talk about that acronym in a minute, and sticking to, coming up with and sticking to a plan, which will help with your motivation. Setting goals helps keep you motivated. So what are SMART goals? They are specific. They are measurable, they are attainable, relevant, and time-bound. So here is this table. Again, I feel like it's a little small, so I'm gonna come down here again. Here it is. So I'm just gonna look at these. I would like to do well in all my courses next semester. Okay, it sounds like a good goal, but is it a SMART goal? No, because someone may think doing well is all A's, where someone else may be all C's are well. So you have to make that a little bit more specific. So if I'm using my SMART goals, specific means I want to get a 3.2. Well, that's measurable because you can look and see. Is it attainable? I'm going to think to myself, well, am I going to set the time and energy aside to be able to reach that? Is it relevant to my big goal, which would be earning a degree? And is it time bound? It's in a semester. So yeah, so you want to look to see, are your goals in this realm here? Also, I'm going to look again, this is another one, motivation. Here we go, a little bit better. So these are things to kind of help with your motivation. And so 7 methods that people use to stay motivated. So increase your personal responsibility. You're the only person that's going to meet your goals. Now you're going to have hopefully support, but you're still the one in control. Reward yourself. We talked a little bit about rewards already. Use rewards to keep yourself motivated. Make certain they're your goals. Make sure you're not going into a field because your parents think you should, because that's going to already diminish your motivation. Visualize your results, kind of literally visualize them. When I was working on my doctorate degree, I had Post-it notes around my house. shouldn't you be reading right now? Wouldn't it be great to have that PhD behind your name? Like, I literally made myself visualize that end result. I wanted to keep me motivated. Break down the goal into manageable tasks. So again, that goes back to that research paper, you know, breaking it down into simpler tasks so that when it's in those bits and pieces, it's not as overwhelming. Use other people's energy. Surround yourself with positive people who are going to support you and kind of play off that positive energy. And remind yourself while you set the goal. I think this is like really important. A lot of students come into the new semester really excited and really worked up to do well. And then by halfway through, they're like, why am I doing this again? Well, you want to keep in mind what your end goal is. Use that as your motivation. All right, and as we start to wrap up, so here are some other strategies for time management. Daily top 3, they talk about these here. Daily top 3, I find myself using this strategy during the summer a lot because I feel like I have a lot to do during the summer and I feel like I have a lot more time because my class schedule, my committee load is a lot lighter. So I find myself procrastinating a little bit more, but I'm like, no, here are the top 3. Sometimes I say top 5, depending on what's going on, that I want to accomplish today. I might have a longer to-do list for the week, but here are the 3 things I'm going to do today. Here we have the Pomodoro Technique, which talks about, which talks about setting a timer. So it talks about, you know, what task you're going to do, how long are you going to give yourself, work on the task. You know, when the timer goes off, you put a check mark. So like it walks you through this entire technique that kind of helps you maybe break things up a little bit more. Eat the frog, and it sounds really strange. It comes from Mark Twain. It basically says, take the most unpleasant or the biggest task, do it first thing. Get it out of the way. Just get it over with. And then that way you can enjoy the rest of the day or work on other things that are not quite as unpleasant the rest of the day. Breaking down period, you know, again, this is going back to breaking things down and then analyzing your schedule. And this is what I said a few slides ago. You know, do a time analysis, see where you have some time to maybe devote to your goals. So here's just a quick summary. Okay. And then again, as I said before, if you feel like you really struggle with procrastination, maybe really spend some time on that section. If you really think about goal setting, you want to know more about that, spend a lot of time there. So I really, encourage you to look to see where you could get the most from. All right. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to talk about our assignments for this week. So I'm going to get back into week 2, scroll down, here are my assignments. Okay, so here's that skill survey. It's just a self-reflection. So it's not required, it is not graded, it's just for your benefit to see before and after you've gone through the Chapter 2 materials, how you kind of rate yourself. All right, Chapter 2 discussion. Your original post is due by Wednesday. This is asking that you have a friend, Amanda, struggling in her history class. She can remember dates and facts, but there's some analysis in historical events using cause and effect. She's not sure how to change her learning strategies to meet her professor's requirement. What advice would you give Amanda, and why do you think it would be helpful? So again, this is around 150 words, so if you need to put it in Microsoft Word and copy and paste it over so you can do your word count, that is fine. And then responded to different students' posts by Sunday. Again, like a couple sentences is a nice response. So how or what would you tell Amanda to do to change her learning strategy? So this goes back to Chapter 2 where it talked about, maybe learning preferences or different ways to take in information. Okay, here's your Chapter 2 Dropbox assignment, Chapter 2 assignment. You'll see there's 2 Chapter 2 assignments. Here's the first one, Mindset for Success. It's going to open right up into a PDF. And these are those growth versus fixed mindset. Here on this side, you have a bunch of fixed mindset strategies. Statements. And then over here, you're going to give me a growth mindset that goes along with it. For example, let's say this is too hard. With enough time and support, maybe you say like a tutor, it can become easier. Maybe that's how I would change that. I'm just not good at, I gave the math example earlier. If that's your example, that's fine. So you're taking these and you're taking them from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. How could you turn it a little bit more positive, as if there's room to change and grow? So again, remember when you're done, you're going to go ahead and hit download, and you want to make sure you do it with your changes so it saves everything you type in here. And then you'll go into the actual assignment browse, find it, open it, and submit it. Okay, your other chapter 2 assignment is called the 10 and 25 now from your, let me try this again, 10 and 25 year from now. You opens up into one of these other, PDF that you can type in, and it's going to talk about kind of like goal setting, envisioning yourself where you are in 10 to 25 years. Where are you at with education, relationships, financial status, living environment, maybe anything else you can think of 10 years from now. Kind of gives you this little, like, if you're into your teacher in 10 years, what about 25 years from now? How would that look different from your 10 years from now? So you're just plugging in based on this accomplishment, where you are 10 years from now, where you are 25 years from now. And keep in mind those like SMART goals. They'll be a little specific. Make sure that you're putting things down that would explain a little bit more detail to these. It says use a complete sentence, so like one sentence per each little box here. Again, download it, save it with your changes. I didn't make any changes, but you'll save it with your changes and then put it inside the Dropbox in there. All right, moving right along. You have a chapter 2 quiz. So again, here's the Microsoft Word document. You'll click on that and it'll open up. Here it is. It is 5 questions, just like your chapter 1 quiz. Make sure you respond to each question in 2 to 5 sentences. So please make sure, pay attention. Some of these have like a couple questions in there. This one talks about, grit and knowing about reaching your goals. This one talks about success messages. Question 3 is talking about asking questions in class. Question 4 is talking about fixed versus growth mindset. And question 5 is that hidden curriculum. So take a look at those. And again, make sure that you're spending some time back in the actual text itself to get some more details as needed. When you're done with that, you'll save it and then you'll put it in the Dropbox. Okay, so again, real quick recap for chapter 2. Your chapter 2 discussion is due Wednesday for week 2 attendance. Respond to 2 classmates by Sunday. Chapter 2 assignment, chapter 2 assignment, chapter 2 quiz, all due Sunday as well. Now we have chapter 3. Chapter 3 discussion. Remember, you have 2 discussion posts almost in every week, so you have to respond in your original post in both of them to get your full attendance points. So here's your chapter 3 discussion. Can you identify any areas in your life that might be a potential problem if there was a temporary setback? So what would you do if you got real sick? A lot of people had to think about this during COVID. Like, some students did get COVID. They couldn't come to class, or they weren't feeling well to work on their, on their information and their courses. What if you lost your job for a little bit? What if your car was in the shop? So what could be a problem if there was a setback, and do you have a backup plan if something like that did happen? Maybe you have childcare, that the childcare closed, or the babysitter got sick. So again, 150 words by Wednesday for week 2 attendance. Responded to classmates by Sunday. Here is your chapter 3 assignment. Again, it opens up into this Dropbox, this PDF that you can type in. What's your perfect week? It says, think about your perfect week would look like and make this reflect it. It says fill in every time slot. So here's like a little trick. It only goes from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. But if you're honestly sleeping, at this time, you can do this if you need to. You don't have to like type every single, the word sleeping every time if you don't get up to like 10 o'clock or whatever. But, go through and see like, what would you do? And then you'll see that there are 4 questions down here. Now there's no place to type them. So what I would recommend is saving this with your changes and then going into the Dropbox, browse, find it and open it, and then in the right submission area, here is where you can answer those 4 questions. Now you can also do it in a Word document and upload 2 different files, the PDF and the Word document, but it might just be easier to type your questions in this submission area, which means you might just have to do like a little back and forth, look to see, did you include study time? If so, how much total time? Did you include sleep time? Did you include socializing? Did you include self-care? So you'll answer those 4 questions in the submission area. It might just be easier for you there. Okay, and then the last thing you're doing is the chapter 3 quiz. So again, that's a Word document. It's going to open up right here. So again, make sure you respond to each question in 2 to 5 sentences. As you type, it'll move with you, so that's fine. If it goes into even 3 pages, make sure you answer all parts of the question. This talks about the different ways your high school assignments might differ from your college assignments. And if this is your only class, you can just base it off of this, or if you have other classes in college, you use those as your kind of barometer. This talks about your time tracking and time management. This talks about that prioritizing. Question 4 and question 5 are both kind of talking about time management as well. So make sure you save that and drop it in the Dropbox as well. All right, let me wrap this up. I've been talking to you too long now. So let me look here real quick again. This is just the self-reflection, not required. Chapter 2 discussion and Chapter 3 discussion. Post your original response by Wednesday for full week 2 attendance. Respond to 2 classmates in each by Sunday. All the rest, the 2 Chapter 2 assignments, Chapter 2 quiz, Chapter 3 assignment, Chapter 3 quiz, all due by Sunday. I will be messaging you within Blackboard over here like I did in week 1 to let you know that you have finished everything so you know you're on track. I hope you all have a great week. Goodbye.